baby beard.
Waited for you, Fry.
This episode traumatized me as a young person.
My head is hurting again.
Where's my firstborn son?
God does not care about me masturbating.
Your singing is bad and you should feel bad.
First get out into bus, so you're like, oh no!
Yeah, I don't like myself becoming the protagonist of this podcast.
You've been in
Yeah, because you haven't learned anything.
Shut up and take my podcast. Yes. Welcome, Yes. I've never said yes.
So triumphant about it.
Welcome, everybody. I'm pressing buttons everywhere on this thing. I'm sorry. Welcome, everybody, to Shut Up and Take My Podcast, the Australian Futurama podcast that pits episode against episode in a bloody, glorious gauntlet battle for your entertainment. And this week, we are in a side mission where we deviate from our regularly scheduled programming to bring you something a little different because you're worth it. And as always, I'm joined here by Ellen.
Oh, why, hello. Literally no one cares about me, Sean. We should be moving on to more important things.
And we're joined by Sean.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you mean... Oh, sorry, I should... Yeah. We're also joined here by a new friend to the show, Mr. Jake Goldman. How are you, friend?
Woo!
Hey, guys. I'm doing good.
I was... Oh, yes. Do you want to throw back to me quickly?
Back to Sean.
Yeah, thanks. You've only done this format for like a year and a half.
I don't... Look, the best is to just surge forward, never think about it, and never listen back to your own voice.
That's good. Don't edit. Just charge like right ahead. Leave a bunch of mistakes and corpses in your wake.
Yeah.
And just... Yeah, that's it.
What is
good
in,
philosophy.
What is in your cup, Ellen?
You get me. You don't get to ask that, Sean.
I do. So what I actually will do is I will give Jake the introduction he deserves. So if you'll permit me, Mr. Jake. He is an Emmy Award-nominated writer. He's also been a production assistant, artwork coordinator, writer's assistant, and voice actor. He's worked on such shows as The Powerpuff Girls, The Trouble with Turkle, and, of course, Futurama. We would like to welcome Jake Goldman. Hello, sir, again.
Hey.
Clap, 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 clap.
Clap, clap, clap. Thank you.
Wow, that's a pretty illustrious list there. We also forgot to add lover of cats. Or
Lover
maybe...
or singular cat, or do you love all cats?
Yeah, no, I like all cats. I have, my cat is the one that I have to pay the most attention to.
Right.
But
because you are in charge of her, feeding her and looking after her.
Unlike myself, there is a cat in my household, and I am not required to do anything for it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I will say I've done some work with a few like overseas studios, and I'll have like Skype conference calls. And I like once worked with this one Korean studio that insisted at least once per meeting to see my cat. Like I had to bring it for like it was literally like they're like before we begin can we see the cat? And I had to like bring the cat and hold it over an entire boardroom of professionals on the other side of the world would just stare and like be like, wow. I'm like, it's just, she's fine. She doesn't know. She has no concept of space or time.
That's amazing. I should stop trying in my career and just get a cute animal. I mean, I've already got one. I've got a rabbit, but like.
That's right. Any cute animal is just like solid investment in potential internet fame.
Yeah.
So
should I just bring it to auditions or?
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. Like because especially like you can just always put on like special skills, bring zone rabbit.
Right. Yeah.
I also should point out that I was already thrown off in the first minute because as I'm saying the intro, I've got Jake kind of staring straight at me because we're on Skype and he was raising his eyebrows at particular moments. It's like I'm saying it directly to you and you're giving me things to work off of. It was
It's almost like Sean doesn't work with very cooperative people.
No, all the people I work against are shit.
Fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Love that.
Are you just remembering that we've worked together before?
We're working together now, Sean.
No, but not in an acting capacity.
Counts.
Yeah,
we gotta play off each other. There's a dynamic.
Wait,
Yeah.
let me just minimize the screen with you in it. There we go. Damn it! No, you're still there.
Oh
No,
God.
it's fine. I got the little floating. I'm probably like up in like the top corner.
You
of your
are.
Yeah, you
Ah.
are. It minimized for a moment, and then you just kind of pop right back up. So there's no escaping Goldman.
It's like
I'll shut off my video if you like.
it's like I like it. It's like your Navi in Ocarina of Time.
That's actually my text message sound.
Really?
texts me, it just says like, "Hey, listen."
Hey, listen.
Exactly.
I love that you did Navi in a very New York way.
Hey, and listen.
Everything I do is in a very New York way. It's like you're born into it as a New Yorker.
Yeah. I guess Link is kind of like a New Yorker. Walking around, shouting, breaking shit.
Yeah. Just shouting, breaking pots, stealing chickens.
Yep.
These are all things that I did while growing up. So, and I was raised by a tree.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Can't wait for your autobiography.
Oh, yes.
We will get into the main reason you're here, Jake, which is obviously that show, that futuristic show about people. The name escapes me at the moment. But before we get to that point, let's go all the way to the beginning. All the way. Conception. No, I already did that joke
Bang.
with Eric.
I was literally about to jump in and make that joke.
We did it with Eric already, so we can't do it again.
Yeah.
Unless we get a listener for the first time, in which case that joke is gold.
Fantastic. Yeah.
It's
gold.
great.
My first question that I have for you is, we're trying to nut down, first of all, what is it like? Okay, you get a form, Jake, and it says your occupation. What do you write down?
So these days, I write down writer. It happened actually to a friend of mine that, like, when we were still like starting out, he got arrested for being very stupid, and they made him fill out occupation, and he intentionally wrote writer back when he was not a writer, and he was like, "There it is, now it's official. I have to do it." That's kind of like how it is. You kind of like have to start saying it. But yeah, when people ask what I do, I'm like, oh, I make cartoons. I write cartoons is kind of the short of it.
Well, because the reason I ask is that obviously when we've done our research before the show is that a lot of different jobs seem to pop up on your resume. And it's kind of intriguing for me to see, I mean, because where you're at now, which is writing, was writing always the end goal from when you were growing up, or where did you see yourself at that point?
Sorry to cut you off. No, actually, writing wasn't the end goal from when I was growing up, but I kind of have a very journeyman style career in Los Angeles. But the short of it was, like, in high school, I was trained as an actor, and I auditioned to like go to a bunch of colleges. I got into a few of them, and at the University of Maryland, I was made fun of by the other actors who were auditioning because you had to like drive down and do it in person. I spent the entire day and I was made fun of by all of them because I couldn't sing, and all of them and everybody else could. And so they were like, "You didn't prepare a song. How do you expect to be an actor here at a theater program?" And I left that day and was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this anymore. So when I arrived in North Carolina, where I did eventually go to college, literally by chance, I found a copy of the humor magazine they made there that was done in the style of the Onion. And I literally just went, yeah, I guess I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I started writing that. I eventually ran that magazine for 2 years. I interned at the Onion when I was in college to kind of like bring everything full circle. And then a friend of mine, literally the first person that I met in North Carolina, a wonderful woman named Jan Ward, who is currently I think she's a marketing executive at ABC. But we were sitting around one day and she's just like, "Oh, I'm going to Hollywood. Do you want to come?" And I had nothing planned after graduation. So I said, "Okay." So
I'm going to Hollywood. Do you want to come?
That sounds like you should have been murdered.
Well, keep in mind, like, she's delivering this in a very, very sweet North Carolina accent.
Yeah,
and
that's
she's going
what
to kill
I mean.
me for even attempting to do it.
She's very unsuspecting.
Yeah. So I moved out here with literally nothing but like suitcase, stickers on it. My first roommate was James Willems of Funhouse fame. I moved out here with him. I didn't even meet him until we got out here. And then, we got an apartment, just kept on going from there.
Okay, so a few things I take from that. Number one,
Actors are dicks.
fuck all those actors who said that to you.
Yeah.
That is
now they call into me whenever I'm directing a project, and suddenly they're like, I always wanted to be a voice actor, and none of them are any good.
Yeah, and
so
you're like,
I
always wanted to be not a... I was going to say cunt. Oh, I've already done it.
There you
not
go.
a cunt.
You said it by not saying it. I'd say, well, I always wanted to be better than you, and now I am. So.
Yeah.
My second thing is, okay, let's head on to The Onion here. So how did it come about that you actually started working for The Onion, and what was that experience like?
So that experience was like really fun, but very like tedious. So like what happened was it was like in between junior and senior year, and me and my friend decided that we needed to find some internships. And because I lived in New York already, it was like I was like, oh, I'll just apply for stuff there. And I applied for The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, and The Onion. And I got called in. I interviewed at The Daily Show, but they didn't take me. And then both me and my friend both got The Onion, and which was really great. And so we were brought in there. We got to sit in the writer's room. We submitted a bunch of headlines. I think I'm in a couple photos of a few of them where they'll do all those photos.
You're like a stock image.
Yeah, they'll basically I think they cut out my face and put it on a Burger King employee in something that I honestly can't even. I wish I could find. It was good, but it was also at the time The Onion was in Chelsea in Manhattan, and a lot of your job was essentially helping out with the admin because that's what's needed in a newspaper. And so we would get calls, and it would be they're like, oh, hey, the Department of Transportation called, and one of our newspaper bins all the way uptown, 35 minutes away, is 1 inch into the sidewalk. And if we don't move it, we will get a ticket. So Jake, here is the subway card, and go on an adventure.
Yeah.
And literally I would go all the way across town, get out of a subway station and go like this and just move it 1 inch closer to the curb, and then go all the way back.
Yeah.
It's sort of delightful internship-y stuff.
That's why you have interns, I guess.
Yeah, this was kind of before. Now, especially in LA, it is, and rightfully so, standard to pay your interns. At the time, we were essentially doing it just because having something like The Onion on your resume is evergreen, and getting exposed to professional comedy writers and seeing how this whole style worked. So it was very, very good. It was obviously a really great time for me. And then eventually on Futurama, to almost connect all stuff back, the writer Dan Weber, when he found out that Dan Weber was one of the early Onion writers in college. And so when he found out that I interned there and that I knew a bunch of like his friends, suddenly I wasn't a completely uncool PA anymore. I've had that was not my only internship. And also if you were going off of my IMDb page, that doesn't even have some of the more ridiculous jobs that I had to do in my quest to be a writer.
Please tell me, because I've stopped trusting IMDb after my episode with Frank Marino, where half the things I threw his way, he just pretty much responded with, I never did that.
Yeah.
So I'm always reticent to bring it up.
Let's see. Some of the stuff that I did, and this was all before Futurama. So I started working in development, and I worked for a pitch man who basically would sell movies in one sentence or less. And he actually did it with he would be like, Jaws with paws. And it's about a killer dog. And they made it into a movie with Ali Sheedy. That is true.
Oh my God.
So
That's...
I spent that year essentially reading all these scripts and in essence stripping them for parts. I would be like, this is a writer we like, this is a character we like, this idea we like, and we see if we could sort of sell it. With his help, we got a movie optioned with Tobey Maguire. This is 2007, and it made the front page of Variety, and all that it was based off of was this random news article I found. And I was like, we did that in a day. And my boss was like, nothing's going to come of it. Don't worry about it. And of course, nothing did. But it was like very surreal.
Yeah.
So off that, I worked for a couple reality shows that would do like World's Wildest Police Chases, When Good Pets Go Bad, like Biggest Explosions, Daring Rescues. I did all of those. Who Wants to Be a Superhero with Stanley? I worked on that.
Oh, fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. Then I eventually left that company because it wasn't helping me be a writer. It was paying me very, very well just to like be me. So I quit and started up with Upright Citizens Brigade, and I would start to do like all this other freelance work. So I worked for like the American Bible Society would have like pray along hours. And so I would essentially help people set them up in front of camera, and then they would like read a passage from the Bible for people to pray along with their TV. I worked the World Magic Awards, which is an award show for magicians. I illegally worked Michael Jackson's funeral.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask about as well, because that's directly on your Twitter page, isn't it?
Yeah, I just recently put that up there.
Should you be talking about it so much?
Yeah, enough time has passed. It's fine.
No, it's fine. The cops chased me off because I did not know it was illegal when I took the job.
What was the job?
Yeah, please.
So what
tell me you're not
was,
a puppeteer.
Yeah, no, Michael Jackson, shuffled off the mortal coil, as it were. And a guy who had fired me about 5 months prior from the worst job I ever had called me up and was like, hey, I need a favor. I have a friend coming to town for Michael Jackson's funeral. They're having all these like stuff set up, and she's the sole owner of every Jackson 5 animation cell in existence. And she's like, she really just needs somebody to like handle the admin with her and like just like go there, all above board, totally fine. $500 for the day. And, that's good money.
Yeah.
I'd do it.
Also, at the time, I had actually been hired by Futurama, but that gig was not starting for another month and a half. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and very rarely does somebody come to you with the chance to work a funeral. So I felt like I had to.
They're the best gigs.
There's not a lot of. Are you saying there's not a lot of work for comedy writers and creatives at funerals? That seems like a wasted opportunity.
So it was like all the way down there. It was like a concert essentially. So there's these lines of people, and they're all like selling T-shirts and buttons, and like people are dressed as Michael Jackson, and they're like they're bringing the casket through. They're doing all stuff like that, and I meet my contact who flew all the way. I think she came from the East Coast and had like landed, and I was like, great, what are we doing? And she was like, okay, here's the card table. And I'm like, why do we have a card table? She goes, we're not actually supposed to be here. And I'm like, interesting. So for the most part, nobody bothered us at first. And we kind of just sort of like set up shop like as close as like humanly possible. And, it's a whole lineup. It's, it's all in downtown LA. So it is not exactly like we're like inside the church or any like thing like that. It's a whole spectacle.
You're not exactly out of place.
What do you think Jesus would have done with all of these?
I was like interviewed by a couple radio stations because they were like just wandering about being like, who's all the weirdos who are here to see? And it would be like, we found this person with this weird poster. And they're like, and what do you have, sir? And I'm like, I have a $500 animation cell. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. Also, there was no like Square readers or anything. So it was cash only. So, which made no sense why you would think that someone would go to a funeral with $500 cash on them for an animation cell, but this is what he thought.
So did you sell any is the question?
Yes, we did. I think I sold about 4 or 5. And as happens when people start to crowd around a card table full of very expensive animation cells, the cops take notice. And they basically like shoved to the front of the crowd, took a look around, and they said, all right, we're going to count to 30, and anything that is still here, we're going to take and destroy or arrest. And so literally my boss was like, pack it up. And she shoved all these cells in my hands, and we just booked it. And we ran away. Then she felt bad, so she bought me lunch at Bob's Big Boy. I thought was very nice. And she was like, well, we didn't sell enough, so how about $250 and your choice of animation cell? And so I got one that I picked one that I was like, that I thought would be a good like investment. And I was like, Michael Jackson holding like Rockin' Robin. And it was like it was a really beautiful cell. And I like preserved it. I wrapped it. And then I made the big mistake of moving apartments and hiring movers. And lo and behold, that bag disappeared.
Interesting.
And when I like spoke to like people, they were like, "Do you like that was like really expensive?" And I was like, "You would have to know so much to look at that and say that was
worth
like
taking.
know what it's worth." That I'm like, I guarantee it just got left on a truck and ruined.
Yeah.
So, because like just of like the heat of being in the LA sun.
Yeah.
So I did that. I worked for a bunch of animated commercials.
I'm sorry, I'm not over this last fucking story. I've got to admit, I'm just like,
yeah, no.
I like the idea that you actually still have the cell, and this is just your story to make sure that cops don't come at you again. Like
Well, so here was my thing that my boss did I'll call her my boss because I don't even remember her name. But
you can't turn her into the police.
Keep it anonymous. She did not understand basic economics, which is that she had all of them, every animation cell in existence for this cartoon that she could have sold for memorabilia. And so then she flooded the market and sold it, like she called up everywhere. So when I tried to sell my animation cell, they were like, look, we already bought 5 of them.
Right.
We're not buying any more. Like, I'm like, I had to wait until it was...
They've been dispersed, yeah.
I mean...
but then, of course, by then, so it goes.
It might have gone down in value now anyway, with the whole,
Yeah, I mean, it's... People will probably still buy anything even if they think it's shitty. Or
that's true.
It might make it more valuable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What merch do you want at your funeral?
My funeral, I actually recently was like, oh, I think I would like a bunch of balloons shaped like my head at my funeral. Like, I kind of almost wanted to feel like a carnival fun house with a bunch of like Jake faces, just very like big like smile, like wow, and, like, really, because in my opinion, like my funeral will be my last chance to really make a mark and like basically tweak all my friends and family. Like it should feel like Jake got us one last time.
Yeah.
And, if anything, that would be the celebration of life that I want. So.
And it leaves a lasting image in their head, just those balloon Goldman faces just burned into
slowly deflating. Like a horrible.
They like fade down.
Yeah, a horrible reminder of their own mortality. I love it.
My co-writer on Powerpuff Girls, Haley Mancini, and I, while we were working on it, basically, she was like, we have to get wills. None of us have wills, and like there was like a friend had passed, and it really put a lot of stuff in perspective, and we're both pretty young. So, like, she was like, it's just a good idea, and we're going to do it, and I'll put you in my will, and you put me in yours. And I was like, totally, definitely. We both actually made wills, and then she was like, so I'm leaving you one of my cats and this fund to take care of that cat, as well as the following, like, Simpsons memorabilia that I own. And she goes, and what did you leave me?
Oh,
and
no.
I was like, oh. I thought that was
a joke. No.
I was like, I left everything to my nieces. I was like, oh. So,
well, at least, you didn't...
Like, she's going to hear this, and she's actually going to be really upset.
Oh, no. At least she didn't leave you everything and then you murder her for the insurance money.
Yet.
Yeah. That's, also, like murdering would just, it'd be a real downer on my week.
It would, yeah.
But like you've worked for a magic show, so you know how to make things disappear. Like you can.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you a story about that one. That was my favorite because I got to see a magician get his comeuppance. Which, you know how some magicians are just like really showing off, like they'll do the trick and they'll be like, "Whoa, oh my God, your mind's blown. I just did this magic." And they won't tell you no matter how many times you ask because magician's code and everything.
Yeah.
But when you work for the award show for magicians, you have to kind of see how a bunch of like the sausage gets made and like the fact that I'm like, well, clearly there's both a tiger cub and a real tiger because I have to feed them.
Really ruins the mystery.
So we shot it live. We shot it what they call like live to tape, where we actually shot it twice. We shot it once with it was all done at the Santa Monica airport in like a giant hangar, and we set up like chairs. And so day one, we would have like 3 rows of extras that were just paid to be there in like fancy dress. And then we would shoot the show once, and then we would shoot it again with the full audience, just so if something went wrong, we'd have like something we could cut to, all that, all the fun of shooting something.
If the tigers get loose
Totally. So, but it was like an 8-day long gig that I lived on the complete other side of town and the aforementioned apartment with Amy Dallin and James Willems. And so for me to get to Santa Monica Airport by like 7 a.m., I have to leave like very early in the morning. If I leave at 6, I'll be late. So I have to leave at like 5 to get there. Like that's just LA traffic. Mm-hmm. If you leave at 5, you'll get there in 10 minutes. But if you leave any later, it'll just start like
2
backing
hours.
up.
Yeah.
So already I'm like on like very little sleep, and it's the day before we're supposed to bring in all the extras. And there's one magician who hasn't showed up yet. And of course, it's the Eastern European escape artist who is winning like.
Well, if it was going to be anyone, it would be the one who just, can escape from things like commitments
and contracts.
He's supposed to be there at 11 o'clock at night, and he doesn't show up until 3. And we have no way to reach him, and we're calling, but we can't go because somebody has to be here. Because it's just an airport hangar. He can't just show up. And he shows up with all his stuff, and his trick is going to be that he's going to put himself in a straitjacket and then freeze himself using liquid nitrogen. That's not how liquid nitrogen works, but that's fine. And then he will escape from both the straitjacket and the ice. That is his trick.
Okay.
And so he shows up. It's 3 a.m. We're all exhausted. He is very pretentious and immediately is like accusing us of like denting all his liquid nitrogen cans that he just showed up with. And we're like, dude, we don't know. Like, just like bring it all in and we can figure it out tomorrow. And he's just like yelling at my boss. He's just like being awful. And then we're like, look, to do the trick, now I'm going to expose how this trick is done because fuck this guy. Like ice sleeves, right? So it like is that he just kind of goes into. It's like human size. And so inside he'll have enough room to like shake and shimmy about, but he will still be like looking like he's frozen in ice. Like it's definitely unpleasant, but he's not like, solid, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing that we all realize, but he did not, is that ice melts. And you're supposed to, all the other magicians bring their own stuff because they do not trust the random production and they shouldn't. And that's like the deal.
Yeah.
So he shows up and he's like, where am I supposed to be putting my ice? And we're like, fuck, we know it's 3 a.m. and like we need like an hour of sleep. We're shooting tomorrow. And he's just like, well, figure it out because I have to perform and I'm going to leave. And my boss is like, fuck, what the hell are we going to do? And he's like, the fridge. Let's empty out the fridge and we'll stick it in there. and we'll just close it, and hopefully that'll buy us enough time until it's until it's morning, and then we can like see if we can rent a fridge truck from somewhere nearby as soon as something opens, and we'll just try our luck. And so then I had to bring up the chemistry rules, which is if
you hate to bring up the chemistry.
But so the ice sleeves were prepared with dry ice, and dry ice, if kept in a sealed like vacuum, if it was a perfectly hermetically sealed fridge, that fridge will explode as the ice kind of just goes, because it's not just water like coming out, right? So we couldn't do that. So instead, we're like, what can we find in the middle of the night? And luckily we found in one of the hangars, which, by the way, exploring hangars in the middle of the night of an airport, super really spooky.
Yeah, I love it.
And we found a pair of bolt cutters and broke into another magician's fridge truck where he kept all his raw tiger meat.
Jake, I think you're revealing a lot of things that you're not meant to.
Yeah, I think you might get arrested after this.
Yeah. So we're all pissed off. And then we show up the next day, and he gets on there, and he's now performing in front of all the extras, and Massive Attack is playing, because of course it fucking is. And he's just like, and now I will escape. He gets in there, and I shit you not, Teardrop plays on the 3 times in a row. He's in that ice sleeve for 15 minutes, struggling to escape from his own trip. And I went to my boss, I was like, should we help him? He goes, no, he still has air. Let's see what he does. So, yeah, eventually we had to, like, just stop it. But, like, just watching him struggle in front of people until the ice had basically melted around him, and we had to wheel him outside and dump him, literally, so that all the ice would go down the outside drain. And then he refused to do the show and was like, I'm getting out of here. This is terrible. And we're like,
yeah, go.
You're terrible.
Bye.
Yeah.
So that's my not so short story about shitty Eastern European magicians.
I'm just
what
like,
other illegal stuff have you?
Well, I'm just like trying to think like how many different things we could get you in trouble for.
We'll see that.
We'll have a meter in the corner.
I watched a movie called Mother and Child.
Yes, you did.
That I did that like indie movie. That was that was pre-Futurama. I did that. I worked on there was something else I had done recently. That was another like super random weird thing. I don't know. I've done a lot of like gig work. You know, you pop in, do a lot of like I did like a couple television specials with Louis Gossett Jr. The moral of all this story is that, like, if you want to, like, the first rule of working in the entertainment industry is being able to pay rent. You need to pay rent. Just do it and, like, keep, like, my days were essentially filled where I would just be, like, writing for myself in the morning, going to whatever PA job that I could, like, do, just so that I could, like, make rent, pay the bills. And then at night, I was performing at Upright Citizens Brigade. So it was like every step of my day was like something towards
your goal.
You know, eventually be here.
Yeah. So how did you end up at Futurama? Did you say that Dan Weber was kind of integral in helping you with that, or how did that come about?
No. So I ended up on Futurama by way of King of the Hill, of all places. So one of my friends who he's written a couple episodes of Bob's Burgers, but he was part of that group that like I moved out here with, is a writer named Mike Olson. And when our school had set us up with like a couple internships when we first showed up, I got reality television because literally they were like, oh, we don't worry about you, Jake. And then Mike got King of the Hill, which was amazing. And so he needed some work, and so he ended up working with the casting department just like as a side hustle. And the casting department from King of the Hill, Scott Muller, rolled over to Futurama. And literally Mike called me out of the blue one day and was just like, dude, I know you love the show. Like, we're bringing it back. Do you want in? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, look, I'll throw your like name in the pile, but just a heads up, like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Because jobs like that are insanely competitive. They're not posted anywhere. And like, it's not like I could just like walk up to the Fox Studios lot and just like knock on the door. One of the worst systems in Los Angeles is that the majority of studios are legally required to post a job on a job site, like a website. There was like Fox Careers in the day. By the time that those are posted, usually the job's already been filled.
Yeah,
that is like, it's just because those websites are terrible and they literally won't post anything in time, and nothing. I don't know a single person who has gotten anything just from that. So Mike called me and he was like, "Yeah, throw it in." At the time, I had already worked in animated commercials for a brief while, and was fired because me and a producer were fired. Or I should say, not fired, we were downsized and let go because another producer who kept her job ruined the account that they had with Mexican CBS, which was, the Mexican branch of CBS. And we did a bunch of commercials for them. And that was like our biggest client at the time. And he goes, "Well, look, she fucked up, so I'm going to fire this other producer and Jake." And I'm like, "That's great."
Because he did some shady things at the Michael Jackson funeral.
Yeah.
Well, that was the guy who called me about the Michael Jackson job. And then months later was like, "Can you do this illegal work for me?" And I'm like, "Sure, man." But after that job, because he is such a well-known asshole in the animation industry, all of a sudden, any single time I applied for an animated job, I would get called in. And it was like I was part of the fraternity, because they were like, "Oh, you paid your dues, you worked with him." Fuck yeah. Yeah, totally understand. To this day, I will bring it up to people and they'll be like, "Oh, I know that guy. Yeah, fuck that guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I was there. I survived. He paid me $400 a week for like jack shit and just yelled all the time."
It's a great thing to be like, if you want to kind of hack it, don't crumple in the face of enormous dickheads, and people might respect you a little bit.
Yeah, and like, even when they hired me, they literally were like, "Are you good, like, working for assholes?" That was asked me in the interview process. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not afraid of anybody." I threw on my like biggest like New York attitude and was like, "Yeah, I don't fucking care." Like, I just couldn't get into animation. And for somebody who can't draw, like, that was a very like difficult thing. And like, I didn't really know how to do it. And so because I had that on my resume, Futurama agreed to call me in for an interview. So they called me in, and I was later informed by David X. Cohen and Lee Supersinski that I was one of 25 people that they interviewed. So for 3 positions. And they at the time, they didn't even have an office yet. So they had taken over the office for the show Prison Break, because that was like wrapping up. So I literally walked into the room, and David is very uncharacteristically behind this giant, like, ornate desk. And the producer, Lee Supersinski, and the production supervisor, Mike Hughes, were like there. And all the resumes are like put out. And like the interview goes like pretty standard. Like, what do you want? What's your goal? Have you worked before? What is this? What is that? And they made it very clear to me that they're like, "Well, we called you in because we saw you had animation on your resume, so you know like what you're doing." And I'm like, "Oh, totally." Okay, I'll share this other little side story. Here's my other thing that I believe in regards to working in the entertainment industry, is that you need to remind yourself that, generally speaking, people are not asking you to do something you're physically incapable of. It is not surgery. So if people can do it, you are people, so therefore you should be able to do it. Once I worked on this short film, and there was a miscommunication, and I showed up to start my day at this like truck depot, and I thought I was meeting my coordinator, and it turns out, no, I was starting the day by myself. And the guy who was renting us the trucks literally said, "So you've like driven a truck before, right?" And I was like, "Oh, totally." And I got behind the wheel and I was like, I don't fucking know what the shit I'm doing. And I told myself that I was like, this is a thing. People do this all the time. Not a problem. And this was not, I should be clear, this was not a truck that required a special license, thankfully.
Okay.
Because that, obviously, they would not let me do.
Yeah. And I think your advice would not be applicable.
So, yeah, I had about 30 seconds to figure it out. And, I did. Turn that key, flip this thing, do that, and then away we went. But, yeah, so that's kind of the short of it is usually I'm like, if people ask you to do something, like, can you do something? As long as it is not putting yourself in danger, it is not illegal, and it is not, predatory.
Yes.
It's okay to say yes.
God, you're like Frank Abagnale Jr. from Catch Me If You Can. You just do these jobs.
Well, because, people, again, there's nothing that's set, recently I have a couple of, I call them my intern class, but they're essentially, people who graduated from my college who I've developed a good, personal friendship and professional friendship with. And I will give them advice when they're like, oh, I'm an assistant, but this job is opening. Should I go for it? Or how do I deal with this? Or sometimes, I want to speak up. I want to be here and I'm stuck here. And my general thing is always, I'm like, look, they're not asking you to do something you can't do. And it's something that you want to do. So you can do it.
Yeah.
There is nothing in my job at Futurama that any person is physically incapable of doing. You just need to have the knowledge, and you get the knowledge by doing the job.
Yeah.
So if it's something you physically can do, and they don't have to teach you how to do anything else, don't be intimidated by it, because people go, oh, I've never worked a table read before. And you go, so then you go there and you go, all right, so what do you need? And someone goes, oh, set up the scripts over there. Let's make sure that's patched in over here. All these things are really easy and you can figure them out. And if you can't, ask.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants this to go smoothly.
Yeah.
So that's been my professional philosophy, which I use to this day.
That's pretty great. It makes sense.
Yeah. For one of I signed a contract recently for a thing I can't talk about.
And what's it called?
It's legal. You don't want to hear about it.
So they're like, so you've mapped out stuff of this on this size before, and I'm like, yeah, totally easy. We do it all the time. Don't worry about it. And the truth is, I believe that I can, and there's plenty of people who really can't, and they still do it anyway. So let's give it a shot, Anyway, my point being is I believe in you. You should do it.
Thank you.
Oh, is totally your tell?
Yeah, totally.
If you're lying about something.
I've actually noticed it also seems to coincide with when you take a drink of water, so maybe that's a good tell as well.
I shut my air conditioning off so that it wouldn't be overpowering, and it is sweltering in this apartment because
you're not nervous.
In LA, so I'm drinking so that I'm not
dying.
And you guys, again, you can see me. You can see my natural glow.
Yeah.
Over the webcam.
Oh, Jake, if it's any consolation, I'm very kind of jealous of your hairline as well. I have I was talking about this with Ellen the other day. My receding hairline is something to behold. So,
it's fine, honestly.
Thank you. And if I believe it's fine, then it is fine.
Yeah, people have hair, so can you.
I think about that a lot, especially for actors. I imagine, Richard Jenkins was in Shape of Water.
Oh yeah.
I have to imagine that as an actor, when he started losing his hair, he thought his career was over.
Mm.
And until he became an old man, did he start getting
old man parts? Yeah.
Now we know his name.
Yeah.
And when he was probably in his 20s with a giant afro or however it looked, and he was probably it was just another dude.
Yeah.
So everyone finds their niche, and it's when we fight against those sort of things, that's when we get into trouble.
Yeah.
It's what annoys me so much about being an actor. And, I've had people tell me like, oh, well, you should probably get your nose job done and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like...
Who the fuck is telling you that?
My mum.
Oh.
I also had, in a screen acting class, had the teacher point out when I did my profile, just pointed at my nose and said, she's got a very exotic looking profile. Anyway, but it's just kind of like, you're right. It's those things that make us people.
Yeah.
And actors are people.
Yeah.
And so people want to see other people on screen, and we're not all the same. And so you shouldn't think that all actors should then therefore look the same or be the same. If Richard Jenkins didn't have like, that kind of like look about him, then he wouldn't be getting those parts, because there are parts for, those kind of old sarcastic men, and there he is. It's just kind of like,
there he is.
Yeah.
So
he's just always there.
I have a very unique problem in my family, which is that like I get asked a lot like, oh, you're like a writer, like did your parents like ever like discourage you, like be like, no, be a doctor, be a lawyer, something like that, in a very like Jewish New Yorker sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have the opposite problem, because there's quite a few members of my family who are theater actors. I have like 2 aunts and an uncle on Broadway, and they are like, my aunt did not get her first Broadway play till she was in her 40s.
Yeah.
And so if I hear them like, and I've had like, it's peaks and valleys. So I'll be like, oh, time's really tough. I don't know what's happening. I got to feed my cat, and I'm worried about like, life and everything. And my mom and my grandparents will be like, what? You can't fucking quit? Like, look at your aunt. And I go, she was much older than you, and now she's super successful. And you're like, okay, I guess I have to do this forever. And they're like, fuck yeah, you do. It's what you believe in, and we don't want to. And so, like, yeah, I'm not allowed to quit.
Yeah, that's so aggressively supportive.
Yeah. I fucking love you. Do this more.
Yeah, you better fucking follow your dream, or else I'll kill you.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Gosh, your family must be loud.
Well, it ended up happening. Like, I moved back here by myself, and then slowly but surely the rest of my family followed, and my sister and 2 of my cousins came out here. One of my cousins is an animator, and him and I have gotten a chance to work on a couple projects together, which is really great. My other cousin is in PR, and my sister is a talent executive now that she got, again, completely by like her job. She got it at a party, or the start of it. Like, literally she was at a party, and a girl was like, you seem pretty cool. I had to turn down a job. Do you want it? And my sister was like, sure. And it was like a receptionist at a talent booker company. And my sister just had this natural aptitude for it. And so, yeah, now she like works with like Microsoft and Major League Baseball, and like, yeah, it's
you brought up parties, and this brings up a question I've had to ask a few of the Futurama members, because it was brought up by, I want to say, Peter.
I think
Avancino.
so.
No, it was Stephen. Actually, Stephen Sandoval brought it up, where he mentioned the infamous Futurama Parties. And he didn't go into much detail about what was entailed.
Maybe he didn't remember.
Maybe. I got one odd story from Raimi, which was well worth the price of admission. Included a dominatrix and one that disappeared after the first. It was a riot. But I was interested to know whether you were ever at these parties, and if so, what the hell happened?
What happened?
Let's see.
Halloween parties, to be exact.
Yeah, so the sad part is when I came on the Comedy Central run, by that point, everybody had apparently chilled out a lot.
Oh.
Like, because for the original Fox run, it was such a legendarily, like, difficult production because, and, like, David was still figuring it out. I think there was even, like, there's a story that they, like, invented a day of the week to like just make up on, so they were on their own schedule. Like they basically cut the days down from from 24 hours into 20 hours. So then they had an extra day.
What?
It was like, that was just the sort of thing that they would do. But by the time that I came on, everybody had kids. And so David was like, I'm getting home to my daughter. I don't like, and they knew what everything was and they knew how everything sounded. That like, at that point, a lot of table reads were really just formalities and we're just like, yeah, we get it. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know? So I feel like, yeah, or maybe I just wasn't popular enough. But no, I didn't go to any dominatrix parties. Like, there would be, like, Comic-Con usual chicanery, because Comic-Con involves a lot of breaking into places.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what? I need to unpack that.
Okay, so this is...
Stop breaking the law, Jake.
Maybe
No,
your best advice is
So-
do some illegal shit and then you'll end up in the industry.
Here's a story about breaking in at Comic-Con. So I feel like this was this. All right. Well, this happened when I was on Futurama. But when I was on Futurama, we had like the Futurama like Comic-Con dinner on Friday night. Saturday was our panel. And Saturday night, by that point, I'd already been there a couple days. And I'm like exhausted. And I'm just literally like out to dinner with like my cousin and Neil, who's at the time the writer's assistant for Futurama, and we're just like dead to the world. And then my cousin gets a text message, and he goes, so last night I hooked up with a zombie at the Walking Dead party, and she's working the door at the Playboy True Blood party. Do you guys want to go? And we're like, yeah, that sounds fucking amazing. And he goes, all right, she's not sure if she can get us in. We're going to have to gamble that we're going to have to wait in the line. And there's 4 stations, and we have to hope that the math comes up that we end up at her station. Because if we end up at anyone else's station, they won't have our names. So we do the math, and we get in. And she's out there and she like greets us and she's just like, oh, hey, and like pantomimes crossing a name off the list, hands us bracelets. But what we don't know is that she gave us the VIP ones. So we ended up sharing a table with the cast of Game of Thrones. And so like me, and I'm drinking like next to Alfie Allen. And he's just like, so what are you on? I'm like, Futurama? And he's like, oh, that's great. He's like, what do you do? And I'm like, production. And like William H. Macy was there. So yeah, we did that. There was another year I broke into Petco Park for another party. That one was a little bit more adventurous. Only because a friend of mine actually runs this old YouTube channel called The Hacks of Life, where he would like break into places, like to be at like, and a lot of it was like dramatically staged, just to like talk through like the art of the con. But this is things that he would just do when he was bored. And so I was stuck on the outside. All my friends were in. It was the Nerd HQ party in Petco Park, where the San Diego baseball team plays, the Padres. And a couple of my friends are in there, and I'm like, fuck, I want to get in. And I call my cousin, and she goes, don't go on the line. Go around the back alley where cars would come in, and Mike is going to meet you there. And I'm like, all right. So me and my friend Dan, it was,
Dan
I think it was from Funhouse. Basically, like, we walk around to the back, and there's just a security guard guarding to make sure nobody like drives in. And I'm like, yeah, I guess we just stand here and wait for Mike. And the guard is just like looking at us weird. Like, why are we just like standing
Loitered.
right by his food? And then all of a sudden Mike comes in and he just goes, yeah. And he runs up and he goes, they're with me. And he rolls down his sleeve and he's got like a wristband on.
Yes.
And the guard like nods and is like, oh, okay, cool. And so we get escorted in. And I'm like, Mike, I didn't know you were working this party. He goes, oh, I'm not. I went to CVS earlier in the day and I bought every color wristband that they had. And he rolled up his sleeve and he had about 9 different colored wristbands. And he goes, points him out. And he's like, yeah, so this is normal admission. This is VIP admission. This is talent handling. So I moved that one up. And then he opened the door, and our friend was literally holding the door open like we were fucking Ocean's 11, because she's like, we don't have the key to this elevator.
Jesus
so the
Christ.
And so then we literally just showed up and just walked out, and we're like, all right, I guess we're here now. So that's...
I don't know if I'm going to be able to use anything in this podcast when we get to the end.
I think you just actually live in a sitcom.
You can, go on and feel free to. I don't think I'm saying anything that's going to get me in too much trouble these days. Breaking into a party now, like 3 years ago.
So what's the
Alfie
show?
Allen's going to kick your ass.
What's the show you're working on, Jake?
Oh, that's great. No, that very excited about it, but I can't say it.
I do have one question. It's something that we talked about on our initial Twitter exchange, which is you talked about that you were both a writer's assistant and the assistant to the writers, and you told me that those are two different jobs, and I would like you to please explain to me the difference.
Yeah, so we, like, production assistant, is kind of like a big catch-all term. So usually that means like I hate saying lowest rung on the ladder, because it kind of diminishes what a production assistant does. And a lot of times people will look down their nose at it, or they'll think like they're sort of above it. Every single time, every show that I work on, I like to talk to all the PAs and the production interns and let them know that I'm like, hey, I did your job, and I know when you're doing a good job, even if nobody else does. Because when a PA does their job really, really well, everything runs smoothly. If you have bad PAs, everybody knows, but nobody knows why, because it's just stuff doesn't work. So we were the three PAs, myself, Sean Reese, and Neil Mukhopadhyay, were there were PAs over at Rough Draft, but because we worked directly for the writers, our title was technically assistant to the writers. So we were not in the writers' room. We would be outside in the bullpen, waiting essentially for them to come out and be like, here's the new script, needs to go out to all the actors. And we're like, great. And then off we would go. Or like, lunch order, here's what we're doing. Fantastic. This needs to go to Fox Legal. Great. We were just at their like call should they need anything. The good part is like a lot of people have horror stories of like, oh, I'm an assistant in Hollywood, and like I'm picking up dry cleaning, I'm doing all stuff like that. Nobody at Futurama ever asked me to ever do anything personal. Once I had to go to KFC for Matt Groening because the Double Down had come out, and he insisted that everybody in the office try one with him. So I had to take his money because it was not an official expense. And he's like, here's $50. Get all the Double Downs and bring them here. So that was all the extent of the personal deeds that I ever had to do. Writer's assistant is a step up from that. And a writer's assistant is in the room with the writers, and they're at the computer. They are typing up whatever the writers dictate. They are that is like a very sweet plum to have. I mostly, in my second pickup, we did 2 quote unquote seasons for Comedy Central, but really it was aired as 4 seasons. Yeah. Because we broke it. We did it in 2 26 episode orders. Yeah. So for the first 26 episodes, I was a PA. For the second 26, I was the artwork coordinator and their like backup writer's assistant when Mike and Neil were like busy, sick, or indisposed. So all of my writer's assistant work was very like start-stop. And you kind of like jump at every like tasty morsel that you can because you just like, you want to be there. That's, you know, to borrow the line from Hamilton, that's a room where it happens. And, you know, you don't, if you are not a writer or a writer's assistant, you're not in that room. You're not there. If you're the producer, you're not in that room unless you have to be there. So, and as like, you know, someone who wanted to be a writer, every opportunity that I had to be in that room, I wanted to take, and I wanted to take advantage of in the most respectful way possible. So the good news is by the time that I had to do it, everybody knew who I was, so it wasn't like, they were comfortable yelling at me if I fucked up.
Yeah.
So Mike and Neil, they're obviously the two of the writers. So they were the other writers' assistants. Is that right?
Yeah. So the writers' assistants over the course of the Comedy Central run were Eric Rogers for the first order, Michael Sakin, and Neil Mukhopadhyay, who started as a PA with me. And so then Neil got the rub to go and be the writer's assistant full time. And then I took over as coordinator and as essentially backup. So, yeah.
So, because both Mike and Neil had the opportunity to write for Futurama officially when they did the segments for Naturama, was that something that had ever potentially been discussed had Futurama gone a season further? Did you see that there was a potential for you to write for Futurama, or is that just something that was never really on the cards?
It's a common thing. It is not necessarily that's the other appeal of being a writer's assistant, is that you hope that you will get the chance to write an episode. I think Eric even posted recently that his first thing was he got to do a Tales of Interest segment. Yeah. And so that became a lot of their we're going to let this writer get a credit. Because sometimes getting the first credit is really, really hard. That's even I know people who get staffed in writers' rooms and then they don't get a script assignment. And so, they don't get that, written by credit, which can really open up a lot of doors. And so it wasn't just if a season went further and Mike or Neil left, then I would have taken over, and then who knows. But that's kind of something that David chose to do for Mike and Neil, because they had done an amazing job. And being a writer's assistant is not easy work, especially full time. That's why they have to be two of them, because they have to switch in and out while the other one is doing edits. The other one is in the room, and they have to kind of work really like an oiled machine. And so by giving them that, essentially, and that's kind of a little bit of a testament to the type of really committee that David ran, which is that he was I want to give everybody that I can that sort of opportunity. And at that point, he was I gave that to Neil and Mike. For me, he was literally here's my number. He goes, I want you whatever you need. I got the he's I can't give you a script, but I'll give you whatever recommendation that I can do. So, I can never. That's just it. Math wasn't in my favor, but I know that it was always on the table, which was nice.
So then, obviously, when you head over to the Powerpuff Girls a few years later, you've got a ton of written by credits on there. What was the not only, I guess, less a culture change, but more so just that workload change and the overall change in experience from now being one of the writers and being in the writer's room and responsible in a way that you didn't totally have a hand on an episode before. What was that shift like?
So there's a couple little lessons that I kind of like to underline with this. Is when I got headhunted over to Powerpuff Girls, I had already had a couple meetings at Cartoon Network. That was I was up for a PA job on Over the Garden Wall. I was really I had already worked a lot in animation, so I could work in production. And it hit a point where I basically was look, if this is my life and I'm never going to get the shot to be as creative as I would like, I could be very happy doing this. I really love the process and I love the field. And so I was okay. I was working on Nickelodeon at the time, and Haley Mancini was the one who reached out to me first. And she literally said to me, it was a Friday, and she's hey, there's an opening here. She had been hired at Powerpuff, and she was there's an opening at Powerpuff. Are you interested? To craft, Haley is one of my closest friends in the world now, and everybody likes to be oh, it's all about who you know. Haley and I at that point had never hung out one-on-one. We had met 5 years earlier at a bar by UCB. I gave her a ride home. We exchanged email addresses. And over the next 5 years, we never hung out one-on-one, but we would share scripts. I would write something and I would send it to her and get her notes. And her notes were always excellent. And then she would do the same for me. And so when this opportunity came up and they're like, Haley, who do you know? She was like, well, I read a great script from Jake a couple years back, and he gave really great notes. I think I could work with him. And so she called me that day, and she was like, I need your packet. And I was like, do I have the weekend? And she went, you have 45 minutes. So I ran out of my office, drove home to my home computer that had all my files on it, because I'd never trust any Google Drive and cloud stuff, because
Smart.
I'm weird and dumb. Ran home, but that packet, it was 5 years worth of unpaid work that I had put together just for this one random day to sort of come together. And if I hadn't had it, then I wouldn't even have been given the shot. So conveniently, through my time at Futurama and The Onion, I had now been in a writer's room, so I understood how they sort of operated. And so they brought myself and Gina Ippolito, who now writes on a bunch of shows for CBS, including Murphy Brown and The Unicorn, and Haley, our showrunners, Nick Jennings and Bob Boyle, and they brought us in for what they call like essentially like brainstorming days, where they paid me and Gina to just come in and just like try to break episodes and break stories with them, and they would get a sense of how I played off everybody and how we sort of like joked, and we would maybe pitch a couple episodes and just sort of like throw it out there. Nick and Bob decided that they liked me enough that they were like, well, we're going to have you write a freelance episode. And I was like, oh, great. Awesome. So they went, here you go, and gave me one episode Haley wrote, so I would have like a blueprint, and then like their notes from essentially our meeting. And they're like, figure it out. You have a week and a half. And so I did. I threw it together, and it became the first episode of mine that aired, which was called The Stayover. A show like that, though, ended up, it was just, as opposed to like a full writer's room, it was just Haley and I wrote every episode of that show, every single one of them. So it was about 125 episodes.
122 with a few movies, specials,
and a bunch of comic books we did together. And that show was run as a style of animation writing called storyboard driven. So I would work very closely with the storyboard artist, and kind of, as opposed to like starting with a full script, I would give them a very detailed outline that had like all the dialogue and a lot of the story beats in it. And both Haley and I come from an improv background, so then we go to the board artist and we're like, look, here are the jokes. If you have a better joke, pitch it. Worst case scenario, you got mine. Don't mess with my story. The story beats have to be the same. And then over the next 5 weeks, I work with the storyboard artist as they start drawing it and putting it in, and then we would type up the full script, and then it would go to the actors. So as opposed to Futurama, where you would do the entire script, bring in the actors, and then it would go to the storyboard artists. So that's like a lot of shorter form animation works that way.
Like it's a lot more visual, like from the outset, you're kind of imagining the movement and how a joke's going to kind of look, as opposed to kind of like, here's the words, and then you can kind of come up with the physicality later.
So, well, like from a voice acting standpoint, it's something that I wish that they taught more. And as somebody who eventually started voice directing for Cartoon Network, like, you'll bring in an actor and they think that it's going to be like Bob's Burgers, and they're going to get to improv on the fly and do whatever they want, and then someone else is going to draw it. That's not how those style of cartoons go.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm going to sit there and be like, all right, I want you to look at the storyboard, and you see how it's drawn. So you need to carry this emotion and act like this is your body. I'm now showing you what you're doing, and now you have to breathe life into it.
Yeah.
And it's it's a different approach. I find that like storyboard driven works really, really well for 15 minutes. When you start getting into half hours, it gets really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's also like it definitely leans it more into what I feel is more of an artist medium, which is what animation is. And it encourages you to write more like visually and really work closely with the people who are like, you know, in television, sometimes the writer is king and you kind of just like lob scripts over the wall and you're like, I don't care, fucking they'll figure it out. They'll sit around. But instead, when you're like sitting there and you're working with the writers, not the writers, but the artists, you know what they're capable of and you know what they like to do. And so if I was working with a storyboard artist that I knew liked action, I would really like play up action. Or if I was working with some that did a lot of like jokes that were a little more cute or were better with like sister relationships, they would get those episodes. So it becomes a lot more of a very like collaborative thing, which is why like sometimes people look at my run of Powerpuff and they're like, oh, it was the Jake and Haley show. And I was like, no, like it was every episode is done by dozens of people. And we're all working together at like different stages. And like we literally are just like following. I'm just at the top of the pipeline.
I guess what's really interesting about that as well is especially with some of the shorts and things that you worked on to begin with, there's a mix between live action projects and animation projects. And I think, well, I guess since Futurama, you've more so fallen into the animation side of things. Do you have any desire to work on live action going forward? Or do you feel like now that you're in the mix with animation, that's where you'd like to stay and play your trade?
So recently my career came to a little bit of a crossroads and I was literally like asked that question and I decided that I was not done with animation for the time being and I really enjoy it. And it's definitely the medium I'm most passionate about. However, when it comes to writing, I am very, very stupidly idealistic about it. And I believe in the old Marshall McLuhan saying of that the medium is the message. And so like, if you write a story and you have this idea for a story, the story knows almost what medium it's supposed to be in. Majority of animated shows are meant to be animated. And when they're done in a way that isn't like they need to be expressed that way, that's how that story is. If you gave me if I was going to make an animated script for Game of Thrones, I would actually write the scenes a lot differently. And even though the events might be the same, just how we would structure the scenes, how we would like place the camera, all of it. Because our relationship with animation is different than our relationship with live action. Animation, our brains have to be convinced that that's a living thing. So we put ourselves into a lot more of it, which is why like voice acting is closer to theater acting than like on television. If you've ever worked on like television or film, they're like, oh, you act a lot smaller. It's because everyone believes that everything you're doing is real. Yeah. Keanu Reeves is on a bus. That's the bus. We get it. He doesn't need to tell us because we understand it. He's Keanu Reeves. We see him. He's dressed as a cop and he does everything like that. If I'm going to a play version of Speed, might exist, the person who plays Keanu has to act in a way that I have to believe that he is on a bus.
God, I hope there's a play version.
Who plays Keanu?
You know, speaking of here in LA, I don't know if they still run it, but they'll do Point Break live.
Oh.
Have you heard of this?
Amazing. That film's pretty ridiculous as it is. I'd love to see it as like a melodrama or just even pantomime. I'd love that shit.
Here's the thing about Point Break live. There is no actor that plays Keanu. It is always a random audience member.
Oh, okay. We're going to LA.
And
amazing.
They have cue cards, and if you're too good at reading them, they will hide them from you, so you deliver it in the traditional Keanu delivery.
Perfect.
Oh.
So
that's his method.
Okay, like I know you can't talk about the show that you're working on at the moment, but if you want to plug Point Break live, I think everyone needs to know about it.
I don't even know if they still do it. They were doing it for like a couple of years. It's been a while since I've looked it up, and if not, I hope they do it again.
We'll do
like
it
they
here.
must be sitting around me like, yeah, Keanu's like big now again.
A touring production.
Oh. So, I mean, look, we could talk forever, and there's a lot of like Futurama things we probably didn't get to. But the one thing I do want to do is bring up a point of the show that, since you haven't listened to the show, I get to inflict upon you, which is
oh shit,
yeah, right.
Fuck.
So we have played pretend for 2.5 years and fancied ourselves prolific voice actors.
I haven't.
And each episode we have tried to emulate a different Futurama character. Now, if there's a guest, they have to join in on the fun as well. Now, it's a bit of a cheat for you because you're a credited voice actor as well.
Yeah, but I'm also not very good.
Neither are we. We never said we were good.
No, we didn't say we were good.
We said we did it.
However, I do throw it over to you in terms of you may choose whichever Futurama character you feel is either best or least suited to your voice.
So, well, I'll say the first one that popped into my head, because I feel like it's a deeper cut, is Ogden Wernstrom.
Oh, we can have a Wormstrom off because he's mine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, give us a bit of Ogden.
Let me see if I can do it. It's like, I give you an A minus minus.
Oh shit!
Fuck, that's good.
That's I don't even want to do mine now.
I gotta give a shout out to Dave Herman, who is by far one of the most like eclectically amazing voice actors to see, because all his voices, especially in Futurama, are so radically different, and he just flows through it. He somehow is such an underrated like talent. And for somebody who is so beloved in the voice acting community and like, in my opinion, the world at large, he's still underrated because he's that good.
Okay, I've pulled up.
I'm looking at cards too.
Yeah, no, I've had to. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to try my Wernstrom. I've already lost, but let's give it a shot. You've been played, Farnsworth. Played like a cheap harpsichord.
I thought it was really good.
That's really good. Ah, shit.
What are you going?
As always, I fucking suck at this segment. I always forget it's coming.
Wait, hang on a sec. Okay, well then, can we, like, because we did a male character.
I'm not any better at the female. It's no.
It's like, I don't know how often we get the female characters.
Yeah, well, okay. Do you want to do Wernstrom first? Go for it.
It's like it's like definitely like a tilted larynx.
I think of Ray Romano.
It's time. It's time you left science to the 120-year-olds. It's like very tilted throat. Yeah.
Do you want to see what happens when I try and do Leela? I don't even know how to do Katie Seagal. That's
no.
Oh no, yeah, I don't think anyone can do Leela but Katie.
Yeah.
No.
It's just so her.
She's just she really just steps into those, size 13 boots.
Oh fuck! How do you even approach?
I guess how do you approach doing someone's voice, like not a character voice,
because it's just Katie Seagal.
Yeah, which is far harder than
Yeah, it's the same as like if you're doing a character on stage at like UCB or the Groundlings. Like you kind of pick a couple of phrases that you feel like you can wrap your head around, and then anytime you get lost, you just kind of like keep going back to it because until you like build up sort of like enough with it. Like so, if I was the only like Leela catchphrase that we eventually like landed on was like her going like, "Oh Lord." Was like hers.
Yeah.
And again, like that's sort of like down and like it's because it's just her and like she's already like out of my range, like it's hard. But then like if I was going to do like Hermes, all that I could really do is like Hermes Conrad, which is literally not even how he sounds by the time that it's done, because that's just where I first ever heard Phil do it.
Yeah.
So
I guess that's also like, I mean, there's like very actory, but like then you're playing the accent as opposed to Hermes.
Which is generally like the way you have to get in with some of those. It's just like they're so kind of ingrained into that actor that you can't replicate it otherwise.
She's definitely got like a little bit of a breathy quality, I would say.
Okay.
Oh, Lord.
If everyone's finished being stupid, which is just,
I guess, fuck,
that sounded good. Go.
No.
No.
I guess it's like there's quite a lot of movement and range. I guess you never outgrow being an eyeball.
Aw.
She quite often goes down at the ends, doesn't she?
Or you can just get people to say, oh, which is just, please don't stop playing. Oh, there you go. Well, that was our voice actor moment.
Yeah, God,
which
it's
is
sweaty in here now.
First of all, I don't know if you're if there's anything else you're working on that you would like to plug, but if you do have anything that you would like to spruik, now is the moment for you, Jake.
I mean, nothing that I'm working on is coming out in the immediate, so I'll say 2019. So I don't have anything that I can really super plug. I could say if people like, they could follow me on Twitter, which is at the Drago Effect, like Ivan Drago, DRGO. Or they could follow my cat on Instagram, which is Manic Pixie Dream Cat.
I know I did.
I will be as soon as this episode finishes.
Or would you like to use this moment now to apologize for your many, many crimes?
No. They shouldn't have made it so easy to break into places. This is how we learn. You have to test systems, and then now they know to not buy those same wristbands in all those places.
It just sounds like you didn't even
some other way to
you didn't even break into these places. Someone just dragged you in. You were forced into these parties. It just sounds incredibly easy.
It kind of sounds like you're in a video game quest.
I'll also say is generally speaking, people will, if you just tell them that you're supposed to be there, they'll believe you. So and it's a lot of times in a lot of places, I've literally just you just walk and look important, and then people will just let you go wherever.
Yeah.
So if I rock up to your house and just say I'm meant to be there, that'll go down fine?
Yeah, if you know the door code, I suppose. That's the other problem is those when it's locked.
Once you're in, you're in.
People, it's the biggest crime I ever did. I did once get on a plane that I wasn't supposed to.
Oh.
Which was good, but I did that in the name of true love. So that was the key.
Oh my God.
I convinced them that it was in the name of true love that I needed to get on that plane. Because I was trying to get to a wedding. And I was like, if I don't get on this plane, my two best friends can't get married. So please let me know. And technically, nobody knows which plane I'm talking about, but I got on the plane and the wedding went off at that edge.
Well,
someone's going to find out now.
I got to say, that excuse worked on me. I was just like, let him on.
Let him on.
Well, it's just everybody wants to be part of a story. And so you just, sometimes you just got to remember.
Wow,
That's
writers
We're all
are
just trying to have
manipulative.
interesting stories to tell on podcasts.
Well, first of all, I keep saying first of all, so probably more like fifth of all. Thank you very much, Jake, for spending
My pleasure. I
a
know
long
we didn't
time.
really talk a lot about Futurama, but I hope that this was enlightening to people.
Neither
If they
do
have
we.
No, and you know what? Maybe that just means that if you can always come back on and talk to us again. If you
Sure.
do more crimes.
Do what I can. I'm more than happy to talk about being on that show. Was honestly one of the best experiences of my career. I always like to say people say don't meet your heroes, but in this case they're wrong because all my heroes were awesome. They literally Futurama was my grad school. I learned so much from it, and I'm very, very lucky to have been given the opportunity to even be a small part of it, but to get to work with some of these people that I now get to call friend. And, the first actor that I heard in a Futurama record booth was Tress MacNeille. For when I was on Attack of the Killer App was the first record I went to. And she was the first actress that we had in. And when I eventually rose up the ranks and became a voice director for Powerpuff Girls, she was the first actor that I directed. And being able to like have that, even when like I told her that, I was like, it was a special thing that to again be a part of the show. I absolutely like. I grew up loving and adoring it, and to be, like I said, to be able just to have my name even vaguely associated with it is like such a great honor. So yeah.
Oh my God. This is, why am I tearing up?
Yeah, why? Yeah, thank you so much, Jake. And
my pleasure.
If you guys, if you would like to come back next week, not only will we be on to Fun on a Bun, but that will be with director Stephen Sandoval, who will be joining us for the episode. So stay tuned, everyone.
Much fun.
But until that time, I have been Sean.
I am and will continue to be Ellen.
And the one staring at me with a big grin on his face is Mr. Jake.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to contact us, you can do so by emailing us at babybeardmedia@gmail.com. Our socials are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @babybeardmedia. And if you're looking for a way to support us, the best way you can do it is by jumping onto iTunes or the podcast app and giving us a 5-star rating and a nice review. It goes a long way to helping us. Otherwise, if you'd like to join us next week,